I never thought a single message could shake the quiet, predictable life I'd built. I'm the kind of person who keeps everything in order: my routines, my relationship, my future plans. Like a shelf full of carefully labeled boxes, nothing ever falls out of place. Or at least it didn't until 3 months ago. It started on a random Tuesday night, the kind no one remembers. My boyfriend, Daniel, had fallen asleep early on the couch, exhausted from another long shift. I wasn't tired, not really, just restless in a way I couldn't explain. So I opened my laptop, scrolled aimlessly, and ended up on a group chat I hadn't clicked on in years. Old classmates, people I barely talk to anymore. That was when I saw his name, Ethan. He'd been my closest friend in college, the kind of friend you don't realize you're attached to until life pulls you apart, and you suddenly miss them in a way that feels wrong. Attractive in that intimidating, quietly observant way. Smart, sarcastic, always a little too good at getting me to say things I'd never admit to anyone else. We'd drifted after graduation, each pulled into our own adult worlds. I hadn't thought of him in a long time. And yet, the moment I saw his profile picture glowing on my screen, something fluttered inside me. Something old. Something dangerous. He was typing. Then a message popped up, aimed at me directly. "Wow, didn't expect to see you online here. How have you been, stranger?" My heart did something it definitely shouldn't do when you're in a stable, long-term relationship. But I typed back anyway. Just a casual conversation, I told myself. Nostalgia, nothing harmful, nothing crossing the line. But nostalgia with Ethan was like playing with a match in a dry forest. Small, harmless, warm. Until it wasn't. We talked for hours about work, about life, about how much had changed. There was an ease with him I hadn't felt in a long time, like slipping into a version of myself I'd forgotten I used to be. A version that felt lighter, brighter, more alive. Daniel snored softly in the living room. Ethan made me laugh so much my stomach hurt. And I didn't stop. When the clock flashed 3:12 a.m., we were still talking. Right before I finally forced myself to close the chat, Ethan sent one last message. "It's weird talking to you again. Good weird. I didn't realize how much I missed this." I stared at that message for way too long. Not because it was dramatic or overly romantic, but because it was true. I missed this. I missed him. And admitting that, even just in the privacy of my own thoughts, was the first tiny fracture in the perfect, orderly life I thought I had under control. I went to bed quietly, slipping under the blanket beside Daniel without waking him. His warmth should have comforted me. It used to. Instead, all I could think about was a glowing screen, an old friend, and the way my heart had reacted like it hadn't in years. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I'd let the conversation fade again. But the next morning, before I even brushed my teeth, I checked my phone. There was a new message. From Ethan. And that was the moment, though I didn't know it yet, that the slow, inevitable unraveling of everything I thought I was began. The line I swore I'd never cross, it was still there, but I had just taken the first step toward it, and I didn't stop walking. I wish I could say I hesitated, that I saw Ethan's message the next morning and reminded myself that I was committed, that I shouldn't reopen doors the universe had clearly closed. But the truth? I unlocked my phone with a rush of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. "Ethan, morning. I know it's early, but last night was nice. Too nice, maybe." My stomach did that stupid flip again. Nice. Too nice. Why did those words feel like a secret whispered directly against my skin? I replied before my brain could catch up. Me. Yeah, it was good to talk again. Made me miss the old days. The old days. So harmless on the surface, so loaded underneath. Daniel was still sleeping when I typed it. His hand draped across my waist in that familiar, heavy way, the way that used to make me feel safe. But that morning, instead of comfort, I felt something closer to guilt, or maybe the first shadow of it. I slipped out of bed carefully, pretending I needed the bathroom, and carried my phone with me like contraband. Ethan responded instantly. Ethan. If we're being honest, I missed you, not just the days. I sat on the edge of the tub, the cold porcelain against my thighs grounding me just enough to register the weight of his words, the dangerous warmth behind them. The part of me that had been asleep for a long time sat up, fully awake. And I should have shut it down. I should have said I was in a relationship, happy, committed. Instead, I typed, "Me. I missed you too. I didn't realize how much." A tiny truth, the smallest confession, but one that cracked something open. Over the next few days, our messages became a ritual. Morning check-ins, lunchtime jokes, late-night conversations that dipped beneath the surface, into the places where nostalgia turns into something sharper, hotter. Daniel noticed I was on my phone more. Work stuff? He'd ask, casually. And I'd nod, lie, smile. I don't know when that started feeling easier than telling him the truth. The worst part? I justified it. It's just messages. It's just a friend. I haven't done anything wrong. But every time Ethan's name lit up my screen, my pulse reacted like it had its own agenda. One night, we found ourselves talking about relationships, the way you do when you're tiptoeing along the edge of something you're both pretending isn't dangerous. Ethan said, "Do you ever think about how different life would have been if we hadn't drifted?" I answered too fast. "Yeah, sometimes." Then he added, quietly, "I always thought there was something between us, something we never really explored." I swear my heart forgot how to beat for a second. The bathroom fan hummed. Daniel was brushing his teeth behind me, unaware, humming a song off key. But Ethan's words were the only thing I heard. I typed back slowly, thumbs trembling. "Me. There was something. I felt it too, but life happened." He replied, "Life happened. Sure. But maybe it doesn't mean it's gone." That sentence was the first real betrayal, even though nothing physical had happened yet. Because I didn't shut it down. I didn't say stop. I didn't say it's wrong, or I'm taken, or this has to end before it goes somewhere it shouldn't. I wrote, "Me. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not." Two words that opened a door wide enough for both of us to walk through. A few days later, he asked if he could call me. Not text, call. The kind of call that feels too intimate, too real, too close. My breath hitched. Daniel was in the kitchen cooking dinner, humming again. The normalcy of domestic life wrapped around me, warm, stable, predictable. But my fingers typed yes anyway. When Ethan's voice slid through the speaker, low and familiar, something in my chest twisted, hard. "God," he said softly, "I forgot how good it feels to hear you." I leaned against the bathroom wall, knees weak, in a way that had nothing to do with physical attraction and everything to do with emotional hunger. The kind you don't realize you've been starving for until someone feeds it. We talked about everything and nothing and all the things in between. He laughed at my stories. I teased him about his hoodie collection. At one point, we fell quiet. That kind of quiet that's charged, humming with everything unspoken. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. My throat tightened. "Yeah? I think reconnecting with you, it's the best thing that's happened to me in a long time." I didn't answer immediately because the truth was terrifying. I felt the same way. And that was the moment, right there, that the line started to blur so badly I could no longer pretend I wasn't stepping over it. Not physically, not yet. But emotionally, I was already halfway across. And the worst part? I didn't want to go back. I kept telling myself I still had control, that I could stop everything whenever I wanted, that I wasn't doing anything wrong because nothing physical had happened yet. But emotional betrayal is quieter, slower, more deceptive. It doesn't break the door open. It finds the cracks and widens them until the hinges strain. And with Ethan, every message, every call, every shared memory pulled those hinges a little looser. The night things shifted again was a Friday. Daniel had gone out with his coworkers, drinks, bowling, the usual. I stayed home, claiming I was exhausted from the week. Truth was, I just wanted to be alone. Or maybe not alone, just alone with Ethan. We were messaging casually at first. Work, jokes, music recommendations. Then Ethan wrote, "Can I ask you something personal?" I hesitated, not because I didn't want him to ask, but because I already knew that whatever he was about to say, I wouldn't pull away from it. Me, "You can ask me anything. You always could." His reply came fast. "Are you happy?" 3 words. A simple question, but it hit like shaking a locked drawer until everything inside spills out. I stared at the message for a long time. Long enough to hear the fridge hum, long enough for the silence of the apartment to feel suffocating. I wrote, "Me, I don't know." It was the closest I'd come to admitting something I hadn't even said out loud to myself. Ethan waited a moment, then sent, "I didn't think you were." Something clenched in my chest. Fear, sadness, longing, all tangled together. Me, "How could you tell?" Ethan, "Because I know you, better than most people ever did." He wasn't wrong. That was the terrifying part. A few minutes later, he suggested a call. Not voice, video. My pulse jumped. Video was different. Video meant seeing each other's faces, expressions, eyes. Video meant we couldn't hide. But I said yes anyway. I turned on the soft lamp by my bed, positioning my phone at an angle that didn't look like I was trying too hard. My hands shook slightly. When he appeared on the screen, wearing a loose hoodie, hair messy, eyes warm in that familiar way, I forgot to breathe for a second. "Hey," he said, smiling softly. "Hey," I whispered back. And just like that, the room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. The line felt thinner. We talked about small things, but the energy between us wasn't small at all. He watched me too closely. I looked at him too long. Every silence felt like it wanted to become something else. At one point, we both paused. His voice dropped. Soft, careful, too honest. "You look different," he said. "How so?" "Older, sure, but also softer, sadder? I don't know. Like you're tired of pretending things are fine when they're not." I swallowed hard. He had always been able to read me in ways that felt invasive and comforting at the same time. I forced a small laugh. "I didn't realize I was that obvious." "You're not," he said. "You're only obvious to someone who used to love you a little." My heartbeat stopped. Love. Past tense. But the tremor in his voice made it sound anything but past. "I didn't know that," I whispered, even though maybe I had always known. "You did." His eyes softened. "You just didn't want to deal with it back then." I didn't agree or deny it. I didn't know what to do with the truth sitting between us like a live wire. Then he asked the question that shifted everything. "If you could go back, would you have chosen differently?" The dangerous thing was, I didn't answer right away. Instead, I imagined it. All of it. A life where I had said yes to him instead of walking away after college. A life where we hadn't drifted. A life where he had been the one to hold me at night, not Daniel. When I finally spoke, my voice was barely there. "I think maybe I would have." Ethan exhaled shakily, like he had been waiting years for that admission. "Me too," he murmured. Silence again. And in that silence, something shifted, something irreversible. Not physical, not yet, but emotional. We had crossed a line so deeply that pretending otherwise felt insulting. Then he said it, quiet, vulnerable, deadly. "I still think about you, more than I should." The confession hung in the air between us, pulsing with heat. My mouth went dry. I felt myself leaning closer to the screen without meaning to, like some part of me wanted to close the distance even through pixels. I whispered, "I think about you too." His jaw tightened. He looked down for a second, like he was fighting something real. "This is dangerous," he said. "I know." "We shouldn't be doing this." "I know." "You're with someone." "I know." Then his eyes lifted to mine again, intense, conflicted, wanting. "But I can't stop. I felt something inside me unravel. I don't want to stop, I confessed. There it was, the forbidden truth neither of us could take back. A quiet, charged moment stretched between us. His breathing deepened, my fingertips tingled, the air felt hot. Then, in the softest voice, I wish you were here. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I wish I were too. We stayed like that, staring, wanting, suspended in a moment that was no longer innocent, until the distant sound of Daniel's keys at the door snapped me back to reality like a slap. I have to go, I whispered quickly. Ethan nodded, disappointment flickering across his face. Text me later? I hesitated, and then nodded. Yeah, later. I ended the call just seconds before Daniel walked into the bedroom. He smiled at me. I smiled back. But something was different now. Something inside me had shifted permanently. Because part of me was still with Ethan, on that screen, in that silence, in that dangerous truth we had finally spoken out loud. If guilt was supposed to stop me, it didn't. If fear was supposed to slow me down, it only sharpened what I felt. My connection with Ethan grew in the shadows, in the stolen moments, in the private corners of the day. And maybe that's why the universe decided to snap its fingers and expose something that would throw me off balance completely. Because it turned out, I wasn't the only one hiding something. The shift started on a Wednesday night. Daniel got home late, not the usual 15 minutes of traffic late, but 2 hours late. He came in with this different kind of energy, restless, almost distant. He kissed my forehead distractedly, not my lips, and went straight to the shower without saying much. It wasn't like him. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself I had no right to feel paranoid when I was the one crossing emotional lines with someone else. But something in me tightened. Later that night, while he was asleep, his phone buzzed. Once, then again, then again. Same contact name, 2 hearts next to it. Not a name I recognized. For a moment, I froze. Not out of jealousy, not even out of anger, but out of a strange, sick twist of irony. The realization that I wasn't the only one living a double life felt like stepping into a funhouse mirror where everything was distorted and painfully clear at the same time. I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to snoop. But the buzzing didn't stop, and my heartbeat wouldn't slow down. I picked up the phone, not unlocking, just looking at the notifications. I got home safe. Wish you could have stayed longer. Can't stop thinking about earlier. My stomach dropped. Daniel shifted slightly, still asleep, clueless, his hair sticking up, face relaxed, breathing soft. The man I thought I knew inside and out. The man I was betraying emotionally. The man who apparently was betraying me physically. The irony hit hard and sharp. A laugh got stuck in my throat, half bitter, half broken. I set the phone back down exactly where it had been and walked out of the bedroom before I could start shaking. My hands were cold, my mind was burning. Should I wake him? Should I scream? Should I confront him? I did none of those things. I went to the kitchen, sat on the floor, and pulled out my own phone. Ethan had messaged me an hour earlier. Ethan, you awake? Ethan, rough night, could use your voice. I stared at his messages, and for the first time, instead of guilt, I felt something disturbingly close to permission. I typed, me. Can we talk? He called me immediately, like he had been waiting with the phone in his hand. When I heard his voice, low and concerned, something inside me cracked open completely. What's wrong? He asked softly. I didn't plan to say it. I didn't want to give it power, but it spilled out of me anyway. I think Daniel is cheating. Silence. A heavy, loaded silence. Then Ethan whispered, and there was no hiding the anger in his tone. What? How do you know? His voice wasn't jealous. It wasn't triumphant. It was protective in a way that made my chest ache. I told him everything: the messages, the tone, the hours. Not crying, not yet, but close. Ethan listened without interrupting, without judging, without breathing almost. When I finished, his voice came out firm, grounding. "You didn't deserve that. Not from him." "I don't even know what to think," I said, my voice trembling. "Think about yourself," he said, "for once. Think about what you want, not what you're supposed to forgive." His concern shouldn't have felt like comfort, not from him, not when we were already tangled in something forbidden. But it did. It felt like someone finally standing on my side after months, maybe years, of me fighting my battles quietly. Then he said something I wasn't prepared for. "I'm coming to your city next week." My breath caught. "What? Why?" "I have a work thing, but I wasn't going to tell you unless you wanted to know." The truth was in his tone, the unspoken "I want to see you" hanging between us. For a long moment, I said nothing. My life had fractured in two directions at once: Daniel's betrayal tearing one side apart, Ethan's presence pulling the other closer. It felt wrong. It felt inevitable. It felt like falling in slow motion. "Do you want to see me?" I whispered. He didn't hesitate. "Yes." One word. Honest. Heavy. Shattering every last illusion of safety. But then he added, softer, "Only if you want it too." I closed my eyes. The image of Daniel's phone screen flashed in my mind. The hearts, the messages, the lies. My voice came out quieter than a breath. "I think I do." Ethan exhaled, a sound full of years of unsaid things. "When I'm there," he said slowly, "we don't have to do anything you're not ready for." "But you want to," I murmured. He didn't deny it. "I've wanted to for a long time." My heart hammered, not from fear, from anticipation. The line between us wasn't blurry anymore. It was glowing red hot, daring us to cross. We stayed on the phone for nearly an hour more, his voice calm and steady, mind shaky but honest. And when we finally said goodnight, there was something undeniable in the silence between us. Everything was already in motion. And after what I'd seen on Daniel's phone, I no longer felt the desperate need to stop it. Some part of me, the part Ethan woke up, didn't want to stop. Not anymore. I didn't realize how close I was to breaking until the night everything almost snapped. Ever since the argument in the office, our dynamic had shifted into something sharper, riskier. Jordan tried to act normal, but the tension between us breathed on its own, alive, pulsing, waiting for a wrong step. And I was constantly one decision away from making it. It was a Friday evening, and I stayed late catching up on reports. My fiancé, Evan, had texted earlier saying he'd be out with coworkers, nothing big. Usually, that meant he'd stumble home at 1 a.m., smelling like IPA and stress. I told myself I wasn't upset anymore. I'd learned to live with distance disguised as routine. Around 8 p.m., the office emptied out. The hum of printers faded, footsteps vanished, lights dimmed. I thought I was alone until I heard a soft knock on the open door of the conference room. Jordan stood there, jacket slung over his shoulder, hair a little messy like he'd been running his hands through it. He didn't smile. He just watched me for a moment, like he was trying to decide whether he had the right to walk in. "You're still here," he said quietly. "So are you." He shrugged. "Didn't feel right leaving when you looked, I don't know, like you needed someone to stay." That line shouldn't have hit as hard as it did. My fiancé used to say things like that, used to notice things like that. But lately, love had become a series of rescheduled dinners and half-finished sentences. Jordan walked in and sat across from me. I tried to focus on my laptop, but his presence made the air heavy and charged. "Did things get better with Evan?" he asked after a beat. The question was genuine, not probing. That made it worse. I hesitated. We're trying. Jordan exhaled through his nose, not quite a sigh. Good. You deserve something solid. The way he said it, low, sincere, almost pained, made my throat tighten. We talked for a while about harmless things, upcoming projects, the disaster of the team calendar, the broken espresso machine everyone hated. But every laugh we shared felt like a step closer to something I wasn't supposed to want. At one point, Jordan leaned forward, elbows on the table, and his voice softened. I'm worried about you, not as your manager, just as someone who cares. The words hovered between us. I felt them in my chest, like a hand pressed gently over my heart. That's dangerous, I whispered before I could stop myself. He swallowed hard. I know. For a moment, neither of us breathed. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was electric. Then the storm outside started. Thunder cracked. Rain hammered the window so suddenly it sounded like the sky had split open. The lights flickered, and the whole building groaned as wind pushed against the glass. Great, I muttered. I didn't bring an umbrella. Jordan stood and walked to the window. Water streaked down the glass, blurring the city lights into a mess of gold and blue. You shouldn't drive in that, he said. Let me take you home. I should have said no. I should have insisted I'd call a cab or wait out the storm or literally walk home barefoot in the rain. Anything but get into his car with the way my pulse was already reacting to his proximity. But I didn't. Okay, I said softly. We rode the elevator down without speaking, both of us facing forward, both of us pretending we weren't hyper-aware of the other's breathing. When the elevator jolted slightly at the start, my hand brushed his. Neither of us moved away. Outside, the rain was violent, slashing sideways. Jordan put a hand on my back, not low, not inappropriate, just steady, as he guided me to his car. But even that small touch sent a shiver up my spine. The drive was quiet at first. The rain pounding on the roof felt louder than it should have been, like the universe was screaming a warning I refused to hear. You're tense, he finally said. You're imagining it, I whispered. No, he replied. I'm not. The streetlights lit up his profile, jaw tight, lips pressed together like he was holding back every thought he shouldn't say. And then he spoke again, voice deeper than before. We can't keep pretending we don't feel this. My heart slammed into my ribs. Heat rushed up my neck. Jordan, you don't have to explain, he said, eyes still on the road. I do. But something's happening between us, and we're lying to ourselves pretending otherwise. His knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. And I'm afraid, he continued, that if we keep being alone like this, I won't trust myself to stop. I stared at him. The honesty, the vulnerability, it was intoxicating. I should have shut it down. I should have told him he was wrong. Instead, I whispered, I don't trust myself either. He inhaled sharply. The car slowed as we hit a red light. He finally turned to look at me. And God, his eyes, I saw everything he'd been trying to restrain. The light changed, but he didn't move. Neither did I. We hovered there, on the cusp, on the edge of something dangerously irreversible, breathing the same air, held in a moment that could destroy everything. And for the first time, I didn't want to pull back. Not anymore. The moment we got to my building, the storm was still raging like it wanted to drown the whole city. Sheets of rain hit the car so hard it shook, thunder rolling nonstop above us. It felt like the world was warning me, screaming at me, not to open the door, not to get out, not to take another step with him. But I did. Jordan parked in front of my apartment complex and turned off the engine. The sudden silence inside the car was deafening. No more hum, no more excuses. Just us. His hand stayed on the wheel. Mine stayed in my lap. Neither of us moved. "You're shaking," he said quietly. "It's cold," I lied. "It's not the cold." He looked at me then, really looked, and the way his eyes held mine made my breath catch. It felt like a confession, like a plea, like a decision he'd already made. "Jordan," my voice broke. "You don't have to say anything," he whispered. "If you want me to leave, tell me. I will. No questions." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because I didn't want him to leave. I didn't want this night to end. I didn't want to go upstairs alone to pretend I was fine inside a life that had stopped fitting me a long time ago. The silence between us stretched, so tight it felt like it might snap. Finally, he spoke again, softer than before. "Just let me walk you to the door." It was innocent, completely harmless, the kind of thing any coworker could offer any other. But we both knew it wasn't harmless. I nodded. We ran through the rain, drenched by the time we reached the entrance. I fumbled with my keys because my hands were shaking for reasons that had nothing to do with the storm. Jordan stood so close behind me, I could feel the heat of him, even through soaked clothes. When I finally got the door open, I should have said goodnight. I should have stepped inside alone. Instead, I turned around, and he was right there. Water dripped from his hair onto his face. His shirt clung to him. His breathing was unsteady, and mine was worse. "You're freezing," he said, voice barely above the storm. "I'm fine." "No," he murmured, "you're really not." His hand moved, slowly, carefully, toward my face. He paused just before touching me, silently asking for permission. I didn't stop him. His thumb brushed a raindrop from my cheek, but it wasn't the raindrop he cared about. His touch lingered, gentle, warm, devastating. That was all it took. The tension we'd been carrying for weeks snapped like a live wire. Jordan leaned in, hesitant but unable to pull away, and I felt my heart tearing in two directions, toward the life I'd built and the life I could ruin. I whispered his name because it was the only thing I could think of. His breath hitched like he'd been waiting years to hear it like that. Then he kissed me. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't rushed. It was slow, almost reverent, as if he wanted to give me time to stop him. I didn't stop him. The door clicked shut behind us, drowning out the storm. His hands moved to my waist, my fingers tangled in his soaked shirt, and every we shouldn'ts I'd rehearsed for weeks dissolved the second his lips pressed harder against mine. We stumbled inside, still kissing, still trying to convince ourselves this was just a moment, not a decision. But the moment it became more, when he lifted my face in his hands and whispered, "Tell me to stop," I couldn't. "I can't," I breathed. And that was it. The last barrier fell. The betrayal became real. We crossed the line in a way we could never uncross. His mouth was on my neck, my hands pulling him closer, both of us desperate in a way that had nothing to do with lust and everything to do with loneliness and longing we couldn't control. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't graceful, it wasn't even romantic. It was raw, emotional, inevitable. Afterward, we lay in the dim light of my apartment, both of us breathing harder than we wanted to. The storm outside had quieted, but the one inside me had only begun. Jordan brushed his fingers down my arm. "We shouldn't have done this," he said, but he said it like a man hoping I'd argue. "I know," I whispered, but I didn't regret it. That was the worst part. The truth settled deep in my chest, heavier than guilt, heavier than fear. I wasn't sorry. And I didn't know what that meant for anything. My relationship, my life, the version of me I'd always claimed to be. All I knew was that everything had changed. Nothing was going back. The morning after was worse than I expected. Not because of what happened. God, no. If anything, waking up tangled in Jordan's arms felt disarmingly peaceful, dangerously right. His breathing was steady against my shoulder, his hand resting over my waist like he'd naturally grown into the space beside me overnight. That was the part that terrified me. Not the betrayal, not the guilt, but how right it felt. Sunlight filtered in through the curtains, and for a moment, the world was quiet. No storm, no chaos, just stillness. Then reality crashed in. My phone buzzed on the nightstand repeatedly, a sickening reminder of the life I'd abandoned for one night. Jordan stirred. His eyes opened slowly, soft and warm and devastating. "Morning?" he whispered, voice rough. I froze. He must have felt it because his expression shifted, concern overtaking the tenderness. "Hey, are you okay?" I wasn't, not even close, but I forced a nod. He sat up a little, rubbing the back of his neck, looking everywhere but at me, as if giving me space would soften the truth we were both choking on. "Last night," he began, voice unsteady, "I don't regret it, but I know it complicates everything." Complicates. Such a delicate word for something that felt like a detonation. I pulled the sheets closer. We crossed a line we can't uncross. Jordan's jaw tensed. "Do you wish we hadn't?" I looked at him, really looked. The vulnerability in his eyes made something inside me ache. "No," I said quietly, "I don't." He exhaled, relief mixed with guilt, mixed with something dangerously close to hope. But the moment shattered when my phone buzzed again. I finally picked it up. 14 missed texts, 3 missed calls, all from Evan. A pit opened in my stomach. Jordan watched me carefully. "You should call him." "I know," I said, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. He reached for my hand, hesitated, then let his fingers brush mine lightly. "Whatever happens next, you don't have to face it alone." The generosity of that nearly broke me. Because I should have faced it alone. I should have told him last night was a mistake. I should have pulled away right then. Instead, I squeezed his hand back. A mistake? A choice? A feeling? I didn't know which one last night was anymore. Jordan eventually left, reluctantly, after making sure I was steady enough to function. When the door closed behind him, the silence in my apartment felt suffocating. The sheets still smelled like him. My skin still remembered the warmth of his hands. The air felt different, like it was holding its breath. I finally called Evan. He picked up immediately. "Where were you last night?" His voice wasn't angry. It was worried. That made it worse. "I stayed late at work," I lied automatically, the words tasting like metal. "The weather got bad. I crashed early." "Are you okay?" I called like a dozen times. I was exhausted, I said, pacing as guilt tightened around my throat. I didn't hear it. Silence. Heavy. Thick. Loaded. Then he said something he hadn't said in months. "I miss you." My knees went weak. He kept talking, apologizing for being distant, admitting he'd been overwhelmed, saying he wanted us to reconnect, to try again, to fix what had been slipping through the cracks. And I, who had been aching for these words for so long, stood there, unable to respond. Because how could I say I missed him too, when another man's touch was still ghosting across my skin? When I finally hung up, I sank to the floor, the weight of everything pressing down on me until I could barely breathe. I thought the guilt would hit me like a tsunami, but it came slowly, creeping into my bones, cold and suffocating. I cried silent, desperate, terrified tears because I knew this wasn't just a bad choice. This was the beginning of a collapse. Hours later, when I walked into work, I felt like everyone could see it on me. Like guilt had rewritten my posture, my expression, the way I held my bag. My heartbeat tripped every time someone looked my way. And then I saw him. Jordan was in his office, talking to one of the project leads. He looked composed, professional, but the moment his eyes found mine, the mask cracked, just slightly, just enough for me to see the storm underneath. It was like we were tethered by something invisible, something neither of us could name, but both of us felt. He excused himself too quickly and gestured for me to follow him inside. When the door closed behind us, he exhaled hard, running a hand through his hair. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. "I know." He hesitated, like he was choosing his words carefully. "Look, I don't want to push you, but pretending nothing happened isn't going to work. And pretending I don't care is even worse." His voice cracked at the end. The guilt tearing me apart stitched itself together with something just as strong, longing. "We'll figure it out," I whispered. "How?" he asked, raw, frustrated, scared. I opened my lips to answer, but someone knocked on the door. We both jumped. Reality slammed back into place. Jordan's voice turned clipped, professional, rehearsed. "Come in." The door opened. It was Evan, standing in the doorway, at my office, looking from me to Jordan. Jordan froze. I froze. Evan's smile was strained, confused. That made it worse. "Hey, thought I'd surprise you for lunch." And that was the moment I felt everything begin to unravel. The lies, the guilt, the truth, the consequences. They were no longer far away. They were here, standing at my door.
Evan stepping into Jordan's office felt like watching two worlds collide in slow motion, my carefully constructed life crashing straight into the one I had tried so hard to pretend didn't exist. He didn't suspect anything, not yet, but he sensed something. I could see it in the way his eyes darted between us, reading the tension neither of us had the composure to hide. Jordan's posture snapped into rigid professionalism. My pulse thundered in my ears so loudly I could barely hear Evan greet him. "I didn't mean to interrupt," Evan said, forcing a friendly smile. "Just wanted to surprise her." Jordan swallowed hard. Of course, we were just discussing next week's deadlines. My stomach twisted. Lying beside Jordan last night had felt easy. Lying in front of Evan felt like swallowing glass. Evan turned to me. "Ready to go?" Jordan avoided looking at me. I avoided looking at him. Every molecule of air felt like it was burning my lungs. "Yeah," I said, grabbing my bag with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. As we walked out, I could feel Jordan watching me go. Not possessive, not desperate, just devastated. And the worst part was knowing I'd put that look on his face. When the elevator doors shut, Evan finally exhaled. "You two seemed tense." I almost choked. It's work. Everyone's tense. He nodded slowly, but his brow furrowed, like he wasn't fully convinced. We went to a small cafe a few blocks away. Evan talked about his night out, about plans for the weekend, about wanting to take a trip together soon. He was trying, really trying, reaching for me in a way I'd begged for months ago. I should have felt grateful. Instead, every word made the pit in my stomach deepen. He leaned forward, taking my hand across the table. "I love you. I'm sorry I haven't shown it well lately." I froze. Jordan had said almost the same thing last night, without needing the words. Evan squeezed my hand when I didn't respond. "We can fix this. I want to fix us." I forced a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Yeah," I whispered, "me too. but guilt pressed so hard on my chest I thought I might collapse right there. Back at the office, I barely made it to my desk before Jordan messaged me. "We need to talk, now." My throat tightened. I waited until the hallway was clear before slipping into his office and closing the door behind me. Jordan stood with his hands braced on the desk, head bowed like he was holding himself together by sheer force. When he looked up at me, the pain in his eyes merely undid me. "Does he know?" he whispered. "No," I said quickly. "He doesn't." Jordan nodded, jaw clenched. "But he knows something. I saw it." "I know," I whispered. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize," he said, stepping closer. "Last night, that wasn't you failing. That wasn't weakness. We were both in it. We both chose it." I shut my eyes. "Jordan, Evan wants to fix things." Jordan went still. "And you?" he asked, voice barely audible. "Do you want to fix it?" The question sliced me open. "I don't know," I whispered. He inhaled sharply like I'd punched the air out of him. I stepped toward him before I could think. "I care about you, more than I should, but I don't know what to do." He reached up and touched my cheek, the same way he had the night before, except now it hurt. "You don't have to have the answer right now," he murmured. "Just don't shut me out, please." I leaned into his hand despite everything in me screaming not to. But it was short-lived. A knock sounded on the door. We jumped apart. My heart lurched into my throat. The door cracked open, and it wasn't Evan this time. It was Tessa from accounting. "Meeting in 5, she said, glancing between us with curiosity that made my skin crawl. Jordan cleared his throat. "Not at all." She left. But her stare lingered in my head like a warning. People were noticing. We weren't being careful enough. After she left, I backed away from Jordan. "We can't keep doing this. People are going to start talking." His eyes darkened. "Let them. I'm not ashamed of caring about you." "That's not the point," I said, voice cracking. "I'm lying to him. I'm lying to myself. And I'm dragging you into something that could ruin your career." Jordan stepped forward, desperate now. "I don't care about my job if it means losing you." The honesty of that punched the air from my lungs. "Don't say that," I whispered. "Why not? It's true." "Because," I said, tears stinging my eyes, "you're making this harder." He closed his eyes, like he was fighting himself just as hard as I was. "Then tell me what you want." I shook my head helplessly. "Jordan, I'm breaking." He opened his arms slightly, not aggressively, not begging, just offering. Something inside me shattered. I stepped into him. He wrapped his arms around me gently, like he was holding something fragile. His breath was warm against my hair. My heartbeat slowed against his chest. For a moment, the world felt still again. But it didn't last. Because over Jordan's shoulder, through the glass wall of his office, I saw someone watching. Someone who froze the blood in my veins. Evan, standing in the hallway, staring straight at us, face pale, eyes wide, jaw tight, and I knew everything was about to fall apart. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Evan stood frozen on the other side of the glass wall, staring at the way Jordan's arms were wrapped around me. His face was a mixture I'd never seen before: shock, betrayal, disbelief, and something deeper, darker, breaking open inside him. I felt Jordan tense around me as he noticed where my gaze had shifted. He turned, saw Evan, and his entire body stiffened. "Shit," he whispered. I stepped back from him so quickly it made the room spin. Evan didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even look away. He finally opened the door. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Can I talk to you? Evan asked me, voice painfully calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that meant something inside him had snapped and he was trying to hold the pieces together. My throat went dry. Evan, outside, he said, not looking at Jordan. Please. The please hurt more than any shout could have. Jordan shot me a worried look. I shook my head, silently begging him not to say anything, not to make this worse. He stayed frozen in place while I followed Evan out of the office. We stopped in the empty stairwell. The door clicked shut behind us, and the vibration echoed through my bones. Evan didn't speak at first. His jaw clenched and unclenched as he tried to swallow words that clearly wanted to explode out of him. Finally, he whispered, "How long?" My chest caved in. "Evan, how long?" he repeated, louder this time, voice cracking. Tears prickled behind my eyes. It didn't start the way you think." He laughed, a broken, humorless sound. "There's always a story, isn't there?" I wrapped my arms around myself. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. He leaned back against the wall like his knees might give out. "I thought we were fixing things," he said, barely audible. "Yesterday, at lunch, I thought we were finally getting back to us." "I know. And all that time," his voice fractured, "you were lying to me." Every word hit like a blow. "I tried to tell you," I said. "I kept trying, but I didn't know how without hurting you." He shook his head. "You hurt me anyway." My vision blurred. "I'm sorry." "Sorry?" His voice rose, echoing up the stairwell. "You're sorry? For what? For cheating? For lying? For letting me walk around like an idiot while you—" He stopped, pressing a hand over his mouth, trying to steady his breathing. I lifted a shaking hand toward him, then let it fall. "Evan, I never wanted to betray you." "But you did." His eyes were red, wet, furious. "You didn't push him away. I saw it. You were holding him like he belonged to you." A sob tore through my chest. "I'm so sorry." Silence stretched, painfully thin. Finally, he said, voice barely above a whisper, "Do you love him?" The question hit me like a punch. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Not yes, not no, just a silence that said everything. Evan's face crumpled. He nodded slowly, like he was accepting an answer I hadn't spoken, but he heard anyway. "I can't do this," he said, stepping back. "I can't compete with something you didn't even tell me existed." "It wasn't like that," I choked. "I was lonely, I was hurting, and Jordan was convenient," Evan spat. "No," I whispered. "He was there, and he cared, and Please, I can't listen to you explain how someone else cared for you better than I did." The words gutted me. "I'm not staying," he said, wiping his face. "I need space. Days, weeks, I don't know." "Evan, please." "No," he said, voice steadier now, colder. "You chose him. Even if you're not ready to say it, you chose him." I watched him walk away, the door closing behind him with a finality that made my knees buckle. I sank onto the stairs, shaking, sobbing into my hands, guilt crashing over me in waves so strong I could barely breathe. My life was splitting apart, piece by piece. I didn't go back to my desk right away, but Jordan found me. He kneeled in front of me, eyes full of worry, and something deeper, something like fear. "What happened?" I shook my head. "He knows." Jordan's face fell. "I'm sorry." I looked up at him, trembling. "This is my fault. I destroyed everything." He sat beside me, close but not touching. "You didn't destroy anything. Something was already broken. Last night didn't cause this. It exposed it. But I lied," I whispered. "To him, to myself, and to me."
Jordan asked softly, pain flickering across his expression. No, I said immediately, not to you. He nodded, swallowing hard. Evan left, I said. He's not coming home. I don't know if we're done. Jordan didn't speak for a long moment. Then, with a careful breath, he said, and if you are, if this is the end of that chapter, what does that mean for us? The question hit me at a time when everything inside me was raw and exposed. I don't know, I whispered. Everything hurts. I can't think straight. I don't want to make promises out of guilt or fear. He nodded, accepting the honesty, even as it clearly crushed him. I'm not asking for a promise, he said quietly. Just don't shut me out. Don't pretend last night meant nothing. It didn't, I instantly said. His shoulders relaxed, just a little. Then we can figure the rest out, together, when you're ready. I leaned my head against the wall, closing my eyes. Jordan sat beside me in silence, not touching, not pushing, just staying, offering the kind of presence Evan had forgotten how to give. But the truth was clear now. A choice was coming. And whatever decision I made next would change the rest of my life. I didn't sleep the night after the confrontation at the cottage. My body was exhausted, but my mind stayed rigidly awake, replaying every moment. Maya's trembling voice, Ethan's haunted eyes, and the sharp, clean sound of a truth finally spoken after too many months of circling around it. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world outside disturbingly calm. Inside, though, nothing felt quiet. Ethan had slept on the couch, or tried to. I'd heard him shifting all night, the springs creaking under the weight of guilt and decisions he still hadn't made. Maya locked herself in the guest room and cried until her voice turned into these tiny, hoarse whimpers that felt like needles in my skin. And me? I walked the hallway back and forth like someone trying to decide whether to flee or fight. But part 10 wasn't about indecision anymore. It had to be about resolution, closure, whatever shape that took. When sunrise finally softened the windows, I knocked on Maya's door. "Can we talk?" I asked. She opened it slowly. Her eyes were swollen, her hair tangled, but there was something steadier in her expression, like the night had burned away the shock and left only honesty behind. "I'm leaving him," she said, before I even spoke. The words hit harder than I expected. "Maya, you don't have to decide that right now, not because of—" "This isn't because of you," she said, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweater. "I mean, not entirely, but this wasn't working long before you walked into the mess. You just—" she hesitated. "You just made it impossible to keep pretending." I wanted to tell her I was sorry, but the word felt too small to hold the damage. "He's downstairs," I murmured. "I know. I heard him up all night." She exhaled shakily. "Let's just finish this." We stepped into the living room. Ethan stood when he saw us, shoulders rigid, eyes already red. He looked at Maya first, and something inside him seemed to collapse. "Maya, no," she said softly. "Don't explain again. Don't apologize again. It won't change what's broken." He swallowed hard. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," she answered, "and I think part of you knew you would the moment you started looking at her that way." The words echoed in the room, undeniable. Ethan turned to me then, and the weight of that look made my stomach twist. "I don't know what happens now," he whispered, "but I know what I feel, and I know it wasn't some accident or confusion or moment of weakness. I care about you." It should have felt validating or romantic or like some grand emotional payoff, but all it felt like was heavy. Maya sat down, elbows on her knees, face hidden in her hands. Ethan looked torn in half, and I realized something I hadn't let myself consider before. Loving someone doesn't automatically make them right for you, or good for you, or meant for the long term. I took a breath that felt like peeling off a layer of skin. "Ethan," I said quietly, "you need time and space to understand what you actually want when everything isn't chaos." I know what I want, he insisted. That's the problem. You think you do, but you're standing in the wreckage of a life you built with her. I nodded toward Maya. You can't build a new one with me until you pick up the pieces of the last one. He stared at me like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion softened his expression. So, you're leaving too? He asked. I know. Not out of punishment, not out of fear, but because the story needed an ending that wasn't just another emotional cliffhanger. Maya looked up then. For what it's worth, I don't hate you, she said. Angry, yes. Hurt, of course, but not hate. You were honest in ways Ethan and I weren't with each other for years. I felt something inside me loosen, just a little. Thank you. We spent the next few hours packing, speaking only when necessary. No yelling, no dramatic collapse, just 3 people untangling a knot they'd been tightening for too long. When I finally stepped outside, suitcase in hand, the air tasted colder but cleaner. Ethan followed me to the porch. Will I see you again? He asked. I didn't lie. I don't know. Maybe someday, when everything isn't bleeding. He nodded, eyes shining with the kind of regret that wasn't begging, just real. I walked toward the car. He didn't try to stop me. And for the first time since all this began, the ending didn't feel abrupt. It felt earned. Painful, messy, human, imperfect, but real. Sometimes the resolution isn't a reunion. Sometimes it's letting go before you turn love into another wound. And as I drove away, the road stretching open in front of me, I finally understood. Closure isn't a door slamming shut. It's choosing to walk through it on your own terms.